Hello everybody, David Shapiro here with another video. So today's video we're going to talk about the crawl, walk, run, fly model of enterprise transformation in the age of the fourth industrial revolution. Now, the fourth industrial revolution is primarily driven by artificial intelligence, but also internet saturation. You might have heard of spatial web or Web 3.0, but really artificial intelligence is kind of front and center, and it's certainly what's kicking it off into high gear. Before we get into the video, I just wanted to do a quick plug for my Patreon. It's patreon.com/Dave Shap. All tiers get access to the private Discord server, where we talk about AI and being neurospicy and a number of other topics. But also, the higher tiers get access to one-on-one conversations and consultations. All of my work is ad-free and open source, and so this is part of a new social contract. Basically, my goal is to reduce friction as much as possible by making information as easy to access as possible. And that's why I commit it all to the public domain. It's all public good. Cut out the middleman. No advertisers, nothing like that. But the exchange is that you people support me, which that's why I'm able to do what I do. So incentivize the behavior you want to see. And with that, let's get back to the show. First, let's talk about industrial revolutions. When I say fourth industrial revolution, that implies that there are three before this. So the first industrial revolution was about steam and steel. This is where we first saw factories and urbanization really picking up. There were new tools, new sources of energy, namely coal and some petroleum. This switched from manual labor to machine-based labor. So this is where we saw a really big uptick in the use of things like looms and cotton gins and all that sort of stuff. So as we got better at making steel and using steam, we had access to new sources of energy. The second industrial revolution was more about electricity and mechanization. So this is where we saw the introduction of industrialized agriculture, mechanized warfare, and then also assembly lines. So this is late 19th century and early 20th century. The first revolution, sorry, I should have said this earlier, started in the 18th and 19th centuries. And then finally, the third revolution was computers and internet. So this is the digital age. This is the transition from analog to digital, which, basically from snail mail to email. And this also saw a pivot from manual labor-based economies to knowledge-based or service-based economies. So this was a huge pivot because as we got more and more people out of factories and out of fields and had machines doing more of that, then it became a knowledge-based economy. And finally, the fourth industrial revolution is, as I mentioned, primarily about artificial intelligence, to a lesser extent about internet saturation. But again, we've already had internet, but we're getting more and more saturation of internet with things like spatial web and Web 3.0. And so that's where we are today. We're really at the launch point of the fourth industrial revolution, which is going to have huge impacts for all enterprises across the world. So the mantra that I always iterate is better, faster, cheaper. This is why we use technology. We use tractors and Oracle databases because they are better, faster, and cheaper than the alternative. Tractors are better, faster, and cheaper than doing it by hand or with ox. Oracle databases are better, faster, and cheaper than having rooms full of filing cabinets. This is why we use technology. Now, technology adds complexity, and also there are new relationships, new interactions because of technology. With Oracle databases, for instance, you need data centers and server admins and infrastructure and DBAs. You need a whole bunch of other jobs that didn't exist before, whereas before, if you had filing cabinets, you had office staff, back office staff. So this creates a need for more specialized jobs and that sort of thing. Now, this is where we might see a reversal, a change in that trend. So rather than having more specialized jobs, it's entirely possible that as AI gets more advanced, we're going to see a reduction of the need for human labor. And I'll walk you through this life cycle in just a moment. But basically, if AI has the ability to outperform humans, if AI becomes better and faster and cheaper than human labor, we won't hire humans. It's that simple. That's the way that the economy works. That's the way that neoliberalism works. That's the way that the free market works, is that it is constantly looking for efficiencies. And if it is more efficient to use machines instead of humans, That's what we're going to do. And that's what we have done for the past 2 or 3 centuries, is every time we have an opportunity to replace human labor with machine labor, we take that opportunity. This is not going to be any different. The question is, what kinds of human labor can we replace? In the past, it was manual labor. Now we're replacing intellectual labor, which is the biggest difference between previous industrial revolutions and the fourth industrial revolution. And so the primary signal that you need to pay attention to is better, faster, cheaper. Those are the three paradigms or components of efficiency. And so as artificial intelligence becomes more sophisticated, more powerful, more useful, there's going to be transition points where suddenly these software applications, these new kinds of machines, are more efficient than humans, and that's when you need to make the transition for whatever that job task is from human to machine labor. Okay, so if you're watching this video, you're probably a business leader, director, board member, whatever. If you're watching this video, here are some questions and challenges that you might have, which brought you here. How do enterprise acclimate to the fourth industrial revolution? What is it going to change for us? How do we navigate this seismic shift? What do I need to pay attention to? What are the main strategies? What do I tell my board of directors? This is actually a question that some of my clients have told me, is that some of my content has really helped them talk to their boards in order to tell them, how are we going to navigate the fourth industrial revolution and artificial intelligence? How do I set the tone for my company? What are the biggest threats and opportunities here? And finally, and perhaps most importantly, how do we avoid getting left behind? So now we're going to pivot and talk about the crawl, walk, run, fly model. The fourth industrial revolution, or the singularity, or whatever you want to call it, this is a tidal wave. It is an unstoppable force, and you can't ignore it. And if you do ignore it, you're going to get wiped out by it. It's that simple. A lot of stuff is going to change, whether in the economy, whatever sector you're in. And if you don't adapt, if you don't surf the wave, you're just going to get washed away. So how do you adapt? This is where I introduce the crawl, walk, run, fly model. With so this is a staged approach that can take you from zero to hero, to use an old platitude, in terms of adapting to this new trend. So you start with the crawl, which is you adopt individual tools, individual AI tools that help you save time, energy, money, and brain power. So these tactical tools are just one-off things that give you just a little bit of an advantage, make your employees just a little bit more effective. The walk phase is where you start to cluster these tools together into Toolchains and Toolboxes. And so this is where you have multiple AI tools that are presented in the same user interface or in the same workspace that allows you to get those compounding returns and those synergistic or those synergies in order to get multiple AI tools working together to really accelerate business processes. The run phase is where you start to automate this. You create new assembly lines based on these clusters of AI tools. And so this harkens back to the second industrial revolution with Henry Ford and the assembly line and the mass production of the Model T. So instead, now we're aiming for mass production of intellectual labor, mass production of data goods and services. And then finally, the fly model is where you fully remove humans from the picture altogether with autonomous agents and polymorphic platforms. And so this is the direction that it's going. All of these things are hypothetically possible today, and people are trying to build them. And so I've just read the writing on the wall, and this is the direction it's going. And so what you can do is you can adopt this strategy to get from here, where you're not using any AI today or using very little, and ultimately getting to the point where a majority of your business is fully automated. So how do we get there? So starting with the crawl phase, individual tools. So these are individual AI-based tools that save time, energy, money, and brain power. Human brain power is the scarcest resource in a knowledge-based economy. And so really what you need to do is focus on AI tools that reduce the cognitive load and decision fatigue of your employees. Because again, your employees' brain power, that is the scarcest resource. Most humans have maybe 2 hours of cognitive labor in them per day before we just get too tired. And so the more that you can perform cognitive offload with individual tools, whether they're built in-house or bought from vendors, you don't necessarily need to build all this stuff in-house. This is going to be how you kick it off. And this is there's a few other components of the crawl phase. Mostly getting familiar, building an intuition for these tools, low stakes pilot tests, and that sort of thing is going to really kind of grease the wheels, let's say, so that your organization can start to adapt more AI tools further on down the road. And what you're going to be looking for is reduction in time cost. And I don't mean 10% improvement, I mean 10x improvement. Because there are some AI tools out there that already really greatly improve and accelerate things. So an example is case text. So case text is a tool that lawyers use that does a lot of legal research. And it can literally do days or weeks worth of legal research in minutes. And so there we're looking at a reduction of time cost by 100x or 1000x. And that's just one tool. So what we need to be looking for is all of these AI tools that save you 5x, 10x, 100x, or 1000x on time, energy, money, and brain power. And so these drastically reduce the cost and time of some business processes. And as you accumulate more and more tools that become indispensable, you're going to build up more tribal knowledge. You're going to have more principles and disciplines and best practices that you have internally. And then also you're going to want to support cross-pollination. Because what happens is a lot of, especially larger organizations, you end up with these naturally occurring silos where people just don't talk to each other. In the era of the fourth industrial revolution and AI, you need to deliberately create cross-pollination channels, whether that's hackathons or corporate events or otherwise. You need to make those channels so that people share these tools. Otherwise, you're going to end up with one department that's way out ahead and other departments getting left behind. You're going to need to deliberately create knowledge sharing because, again, building up that tribal knowledge and best practices, that is the name of the game as you're either developing or adopting these individual AI tools. The walk phase is where you start to really accumulate these tools into toolchains and toolboxes. So these are clusters of tools that work together really well, and either you can, if you have the ability to bring them together into a single user experience or user interface, that's great. Or if your vendors have the ability to do that. This is the way that things are going, where instead of just having one tool, you have a bunch of tools to perform work on your work product, whether it's a legal filing or some of my clients, they deal with regulatory compliance, and so they need to have lawsuits or filings with regulatory bodies. Or in the case of if you're a fiction writer like I am, I have a collection of AI tools that I use to either brainstorm or provide feedback. And so by creating these collections of tools and putting them together in one place, you start to create like a workspace or a workbench that uses these AI tools. And so then the takeaway here is you start to pay attention to the end-to-end process. Where are the inputs and outputs of various business work products? And what I mean by a work product is, are you paying bills? Are you filing taxes? Right? There's all kinds of business things that they're all information and data based. And I don't mean database like SQL. I mean they're data-oriented work products. And so by focusing on the end-to-end process, what are the inputs, outputs, and transformations that they go through, you can start to build those workflows. And then you're starting to build the beginnings of the assembly line where you have stations that have those clusters of tools and work product moves seamlessly from one station to the next. And so this is the run phase, the assembly lines. And so how are these modified by artificial intelligence? In this case, you have automatic routing, automatic resource allocation, and you start to reduce human involvement. So again, it's about paying attention to the flow of work products from input to the transformations that happen to it, as well as the outputs. So when I say resource allocation, what I mean is there something that a human needs to sign off on? is there external information that you need access to, or are there specific transformations that need to happen to that information in order for it to be useful or valuable for the output? So, for instance, in the financial department, there's a tremendous number of transformations that happen to the information that they need, whether it's just raw receipts and bills. They take all that, they transform that information into something that's more useful, to gain insights from it, to tell stories about it. And ultimately that is used to, pay the bills, to pay your employees, to pay taxes, that sort of stuff. Another big part of the assembly lines is to continue to reduce decision fatigue and overall reducing human involvement. And so part of this, one of the biggest gates here is using AI for the checks, for the oversight, and for the monitoring. So in the previous stage, in the Toolchains and Toolboxes, you still have humans doing most of the work. They're just using AI tools to do their work faster. In the assembly line phase, this is where you start to have the machines doing more of the work for the humans, and you have the humans providing oversight and guidance to ensure that things don't go off the rails. But one of the key takeaways here is that you're constantly streamlining and optimizing the workflows and processes, and you're also creating more layers of abstraction. And so what I mean by that is you've got the individual tools doing the work on the business processes, but then you also have a layer above that that is monitoring and watching and doing quality control. And like I said, at first you're going to have humans doing most of the quality control, but what you should be doing is then using the AI to do as much of the quality control, monitoring, and routing as possible. And that is, once you develop that discipline where you have the workflows that are fully automated, that is where you get to the autonomous agents and polymorphic platforms. That is kind of the end goal here. And what I mean by that is workflows that make workflows, workflows that modify applications, workflows that are mission-oriented and mission-driven and are fully instrumented and use the telemetry to make decisions about how to change themselves or change each other. And so this sounds like a really huge step, but once you have fully automated assembly lines across your organization for every department, and that includes IT, that includes software, that includes finance, that includes HR, then everything is operationalized and everything is automated. And so then you can take those same principles that you've learned over time and create this flywheel, right? This flywheel effect of self-improvement, of continuously removing humans from the loop. Because again, the biggest constraint that we're going to see here in this age of post-labor economics is removing the human bottleneck from business. And that might sound like really dystopian to some people, because again, what I'm literally talking about is a roadmap to get humans out of the labor force altogether, or as much as possible. Now, we will need to renegotiate the social contract between businesses, people, and government, but that's a topic for another video. What I'm talking about here is how do we get businesses to the point where they are making the most possible use of artificial intelligence, and that is removing human bottlenecks as much as possible with principle-driven, mission-oriented, and self-directed polymorphic applications and autonomous agents. So that is the gold standard. One thing that I've noticed out there in the industry is that a lot of people are trying to put the cart before the horse, which is actually why I decided to make this video, is because a lot of people see that autonomous agents are possible and they're trying to go straight there. And particularly for enterprise organizations, it's going to be really difficult to jump straight to the end of the line with fully autonomous agents. Sure, you can do it in smaller areas, with one-off tools here and there, but really, particularly for the large enterprises, you're going to need to go through a transformational phase, which means building up that familiarity, building up that intuition, building the tools that build the tools, building the tools that automate the assembly lines, and then building the watchers, and then the watchers that watch the watchers, that sort of thing. Now, what's going to happen to your organization? I made another video that was a generative AI for CEOs where I kind of talk about maintaining those principles and paying attention to the fact that there probably will be layoffs. Now, I don't know what the net effect is going to be. Personally, I anticipate that most human jobs are going away for good, particularly in the knowledge sector. So there's a trend that I like to use, and that is 200 years ago, 95% of us were farmers. Now only 2% of us are farmers. And so those jobs were ultimately replaced by new kinds of jobs. I don't know if that's going to happen, but this is a characteristic of all industrial revolutions, which is that the composition of the labor force changes drastically. And I think that that's going to happen again. Again, I don't know what the net effect is. Personally, I think that we're going to lose most jobs, but time will tell. But the purpose of this video is how do businesses get from here to ahead of the curve on the fourth industrial revolution? So thanks for watching. I hope you got a lot out of this. Reach out to me on LinkedIn or Patreon if you'd like to talk about it, either podcast, consultation, or whatever. Thanks. Have a good one.